mean, that's one of the things I learned from, you know, from Dr. Fulani. I feel so fortunate that, and thankful that I met Dr. Fulani when I did in 1989, and often I would accompany her on, a lot of the, marches that she participated in. So I had a chance to, sit in the car with her and talk a lot about things, and or sometimes, in the office talk about, the importance of organizing people, what it meant to, and what it still means, to help direct people, to help give people a chance to be active, because sometimes, it is easy to get frustrated. And I remember Dr. Fulani saying a long time ago, and I still think about this a lot, because I remember she was having a meeting with some folks, and somebody was saying how frustrated they were. And Dr. Fulani says, we don't have the luxury of being frustrated. Like, frustrating is, is when you can't literally do anything about a problem. And so the issue, instead of getting frustrated, now sometimes you can get angry about stuff, and you can feel sad about losing people or seeing the loss of life that unfortunately we see in the world. But then what you do is you take that anger, that sadness, and then how do you organize a grouping of people to do something different? And I remember, at one point even thinking that I was too angry to be an organizer. And I remember Dr. Fulani saying, I don't want to take away your anger. I want you to channel that anger and do something constructive with it. And I really learned a lot about how to take that energy, that anger over racism and over bigotry, and how to take all the stuff, as again, just as Dr. Fulani said, take all the crap that I've experienced and then throw it right back at these individuals. But how do you organize people so that, other individuals, women and men of all races, whether they're Black or white or Jewish or gay or straight, how can you organize people to do something constructive, instead of just sitting around frustrated, instead of sitting around being reactive to things that happen and getting angry and all the other things that happen, and sad and angry at people. But how can we become good organizers, where we can actually take those same individuals and show them how we can work together to create something that is brand new, that to create something, like building the All Stars Project, so we can do something and have young people participating in developmental activities, because ultimately, too many times people wait until, sometimes when a Black teenager is dead on the pavement, and then we obviously are justifiably angry at seeing that loss of life. But there's so many living Black teenagers who don't have opportunities to grow, who also feel frustrated, who also feel angry, who also feel isolated, who also feel marginalized. So how can we as organizers invite them into an organization like the All Stars Project, where instead of being isolated, instead of being disconnected, instead of being marginalized, where they can participate with a group of adults who are actually trying to, do something to show them some developmental opportunities. So that's how I see organizing. Like, how can we become good at telling or inviting, women that we don't know or men that we don't know to be part of what we're doing. Like we enjoy the organizing activity, but how can we invite people to join us in doing the same things that we're doing?
Yeah, if I could piggyback on that for a minute. I mean, I think organizing is the key to social justice. If you look at history, all social justice comes from masses of people thousands, millions of people getting organized and struggling, fighting in various ways for for justice. You could go all the way back, and just in the United States, you could take that back to the first American Revolution, to the abolitionist movement and the Civil War, to the labor movements in the 30s and 40s, to the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, to the anti-war movement and all the things that grew out of that in the 1960s. There were millions of people being organized and mobilized. So that to me is key, to realize that social justice comes from the bottom up. I mean, sometimes you can get people on the top to come along with you or to respond to your demands, but the power comes from ordinary people in large numbers getting organized. And then that raises the next question: what do they get organized to? I think there's many things that people can get organized to, and we've heard this evening, both from David and Dylan, for example, about the power and importance of organizing against racism in this particular case, against the violence and evil of racism. Well, in David's case, going back to the 80s, and in Dylan's case, to the Black Lives Matter movement of a couple of years ago. And that's extremely important part of what we organize for. At the same time, as David is, I think, implying pretty explicitly, and Dylan has also referred to, what do you do after the demonstration? What can you create that keeps people engaged and keeps people growing and keeps people in an environment where they can take on the fight for social justice? And I started calling that kind of work reconstructive power. You use your power to create something different, something new that works better for the people who are building it. In the case of the All-Stars, for example, in some ways, it's a response to the failure of the education system to provide a decent and growthful education to our young people, in particular to young people of color, but to all poor young people in this country. And so we couldn't take on the schools directly. We didn't have the power to do that, but what we did have the power to do was build something that allowed young people outside of school to be engaged in developmental activities, to grow, to see that they had more potential than they were allowed to believe, that they didn't have to be stuck in the social roles that society has given them, and that they grow out of that. And that leads to many, many, I could go on and on about the kinds of activities that the All-Stars in particular, which David and I both have long roots in, have built to give people a chance to keep growing and developing in a way that takes on the educational system by creating something better and different. And that's true also in the political arena in our community. But the reason we do independent politics is the two old parties just don't go anywhere for the masses of people. So we have to challenge that and try to come up with something better. And that ties me back to Dylan's point about how he just, came to realize that he couldn't demonstrate every day, that he is an actor, that he has an art form, and that he can use that. And I think it's for social justice. And I think that's really important, that if you're going to, in the long run, build some alternative to the way the world is, you've got to organize people to do what they want to do and what they can do. And if you give them an activity of building something together, everybody grows from that, whether it be a theater ensemble like what you've built, Wanda, or whether it be a youth program like the All-Stars has built, whether it be a food co-op, we could go on and on, but people need to build things together in order to provide continuity and ongoing development to folks in the social justice struggle. That isn't to negate the angry demonstrations. Those are a very important part of changing the world as well. But I think that if that's all we have, then we stop, then the process slows down or stops after the demonstration, after you get the conviction or you don't, after you win the strike or you don't, after you make the revolution or you don't. But the challenge to us, I think, is to keep building and keep growing if we're going to sustain our vision of a socially just world.